Hi, everyone.
Hi.
If I could speak better, this will be a much better podcast. Hi, everyone. Nina is with me and helping me out here. Nina Rao, so great to have you. It's just this is the best part, everybody, of doing podcasts with, especially with friends, that we can hang out like this and just talk is wonderful.
I agree.
But in this case, there's more than talk. There's music, because Nina, as many of you know, has been chanting for quite some time and has a brand new record that's coming out at the end of September called Anuban. And we're going to talk about that, and you're going to
Okay,
explain.
first of all,
Yeah. Anubhav. Okay.
yes.
I can't read my writing. Okay. What am I going to do? All right. You say it properly and tell us what it means.
Anubhav. So, Anubhav is a word actually that Ma used when I was talking to her. And a lot of the time that I spent with Siddhi Ma, as you know, she talked about doing practice. That was a big part. Any question you went to her with, she would say, well, do Hanuman Chalisa, or go sit in front of Maharaj-ji, do pratna, do this, do that. And when she was talking to me about practice, and she said it's very important to have a disciplined practice, she also said, you can have whatever, you'll have spiritual experiences of your own inner experience. And that's when she used that word Anubhav, which kind of caught my attention. Because as I understand it, once you keep doing practice, or even if you don't do practice, we all have our own experience, right? And that experience is what we learn to trust as we make decisions to walk down the path. So that word to me carries a lot of weight. It's the place in your heart where we trust ourselves.
What's the literal translation?
The literal translation is spiritual experience, or perception, or understanding, but on the inside. It's not something that's necessarily taught to you. It's like a spontaneous arising.
Yeah, it's intuitive arising.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Great record. There's so many wonderful things. Is this a double record?
No.
No.
The first one was a double record, only because people wanted multiple melodies of the Hanuman Chalisa. So when I made Antarayaami, the first disc is all kirtan, and the second is Hanuman Chalisas plus an old bhajan that I did with my grandfather, and then we kind of put it together along with our current day family. This one is just a single CD.
Right. And there is a Chalisa on it, everybody. And one thing, we all Westerners have to thank Nina a whole bunch for helping us with the Hanuman Chalisa, most especially around the pronunciation, as Nina, as you know, is from India. And the best we had till you was, maybe Krishna Das. He has done a pretty good job, and he's gotten better over the years in terms of the pronunciation. And do you help him out when he does the Chalisa on record?
Not really.
You don't stand right in front of him like a...
He doesn't want my help. He talks about how the way in which he pronounces things. He jokingly says, my Hinglish, or something like this. So as he describes it, there are 4 different T's and D's in the Sanskrit or in Hindi as well. And it's hard for Westerners, when you don't actually speak the language, to hear the difference between da, ta, da, da, da. And it's like, wait, he said, doesn't that all sound the same? So he's made it simpler. And what I try to do is to just sing it as I hear it, because I spoke Hindi, when I lived in India, and of course I do now also when I go back there. So I try to make it as close, and it is, I think, the right pronunciation.
Yeah. As I say, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And not to be too inside here, we're just talking about Krishna Das, who most of you do know. But Nina has been working with him for many, many, many years. It's how I met Nina in the 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah.
And so that's been a pretty good job that you've had, and you've been of enormous help to him and therefore to many people. So that's part of Nina's realm is certainly Krishna Das, and of course what she's doing here with music. But Nina, since what I'd love is just, it's interesting, this juxtaposition that you're in, as an Indian woman living in America. And I know your story, but I'd like you to share just growing up in India, a little bit of yourself then, and because you really grew up in the just the essence of a wonderful Indian family. It's what Krishnadas and I both talk about when we talk about how we got from people like K.K. Shah an introduction to what Indian family really is and what that means. And you lived it and then came to America. Maybe just talk a little bit about what that was for you.
Well, it's interesting to actually discuss this because my first reaction, when Krishnadas would say there are functional families in India, is to say, really? I mean, families are families everywhere.
Yeah.
I see beautifully functional families in the West as well. The difference, I think, is that in the case of my family, my mother's father, he had his place in the world. He was a civil engineer for the British government. And as it happens, he was, the most well-to-do citizen of the little village that he came from. And so he had the only car, So for example, when we went to visit him, when we came from the trains, we arrived at the train station. His was the only car on the road, and everybody in the village all the kids were running behind the car to see, who's come. And they'd heard we'd come from abroad because my father worked with Air India. And so we spent 6 years in India and 6 months abroad. So in the first 20 years of my life, I really only spent 10 years in India. But my parents grew up in India. They, obviously held on to a lot of their Indian family values. But my father was very keen that my sisters and I live in the West. Because he felt, he was really very much ahead of his time in terms of how he was with women. For example, when he married my mother, he refused. He said, I will marry her because I want to marry her, but I don't want her family's dowry.
Wow.
That was something in those days, Not that it was great riches or anything, but you know how it is in India. That was the custom. Yeah. So he felt very strongly, just on principle, that wasn't the right thing. So that was my dad. And he raised us like he would have. I have 2 sisters. And he raised us, I'd say, like the way you would raise boys in India, which is to give them all the opportunities you can, give them all the education you can. He taught me how to drive. He taught me how to change tires in the car. He taught me how to fix things. And at the same time, he also knew how to cook and take care of us. And so we learned from him. And of course, my mother, she was always present. She didn't work, so she was at home and took care of us. But our understanding growing up is that they were both in agreement on what their dharma was. And the dharma was to be our parents and do the best they could for each other and also for the children. So I never grew up thinking that, my parents wouldn't be together or the house would split up or, I don't think my mother ever thought for one moment in her life that her husband wasn't going to take care of her. Yeah. Now, in our generation, mine, and then everything onward, it's very different. I mean, I've been married twice and divorced twice already. Already. Sorry, not already.
Wait, before you go on though, talk just dharma. Give a little definition of dharma so everybody can, especially.
Dharma, particularly, I use the word in the context of right living, in a way where you have concern for all other beings, taking care of your family, and following in the footsteps of those who've lived a life that's dedicated to honoring the divine, not just like somebody out there, but as in everybody else. But as you know, when you're in India, everything is done and thought of in the context of God. And though my parents didn't have a guru, like we didn't have a family guru per se, we had puja every night before dinner. It was just a little altar. We lived everywhere in the world outside, and we lived in a modern way. But at home, that was always there. And we always went back to that. That, my dad would light an incense, and my mother would light the lamp before we had dinner every night. And she would read the Devi Bhagavatam, things like this. So there were
just nothing things that.
Yeah.
Not even in a dream could I have ever expected that in my growing up family, right. Okay?
Yeah, well, and they never asked us actually to participate in any of that. Some of the things we did would be we'd go to temple for special occasions. But I have to say, I might have been a little bit more predisposed to this path for whatever reason, because when I did visit my grandfather, it was different, because he lived in a country home in the village in South India. And he had a big, beautiful puja room. And they were, he was a devotee of Sai Baba. He had pictures of Shirdi Sai, but he also went to see Satya Sai Baba. Like, he was part of that, not intensely so, but enough that they would go see him.
Did you go with your father to see Satya?
No, this was my grandfather.
Oh, your grandfather?
Did my grandfather. I never went. No, my parents did. Mm-hmm. I asked Siddhi Ma about that, and I'll tell you about that later. Yeah. But when I went there, everything went on in the household as normal. We had mango trees and there were coconut trees and things were going on all the time. But puja happened every night. And my grandfather, he'd wear his dhoti and he had his I just suddenly had a thought of him. Okay. Oh. He sat with his lungi and he would sit in front of the altar and he knew these prayers. And, Raghu, he never studied music on his own, but I have recordings of him singing some South Indian poet saints, bhajans, that he basically taught himself. He knew the words and he made up his own melodies, or he had heard them somewhere, and he had a foot pedal harmonium. And so he would play with two hands.
There's a foot pedal harmonium.
There is. You pump it with your feet.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's where I first saw a harmonium. And so I had never heard him play. And one time when I was there, I saw this harmonium. And because I always wanted to take piano lessons as a child, I said, let me just play on the harmonium and play some of the songs that I'd learned in school, which I don't know what they were. So he said, sure, you can. And I said, why don't you show me something you can play? And he said, I will, but you have to sing with me. So that was the first time that I had ever done like call and response in that way. So I said, sure. So he started singing Vinayaka, which is the bhajan that's on my first album, Antarayaami, at the end. And I have this memory of this feeling I had where as he started singing, I had no idea what he was singing. And somehow it was so easy to respond. And we all entered into this space, which we all understand now when we chant, But I'd never had that. And I don't know how I had the wherewithal to actually tape it. I had one of those little, those audio tape things, because I had brought my own music and some blank tapes. So I recorded it. So I still have those recordings.
How old were you?
The first time he started singing with me, I was about 9. And then the next time I went back, I was 10.
And you were recording at 10 years old?
Yeah.
Wow. That's called getting in line with your eventual work dharma, is it not?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't recording myself. I was recording other things that was going on, Yeah.
That's so great.
So that's what happened. The other thing that he had, though, which is such a blessing for me, was he had all English translations of Krishna Leela, of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and I would read them. We didn't have phones and computers in the summer holidays, right, in those days. So you read. So I took all those books off the shelf and I would read them. And I read them every summer that I went back. And when he died, my aunt gave me all those books. So now I have them here.
Wow. That's so
So
great.
somewhere, everything was filtering down, even though I didn't have a steady practice. Somewhere in there, like the Leelas and the sacred texts, they found a place inside me, which then got revived and awakened when I started chanting with Krishna Das.
But in that period that, I guess you started a family, you were working, and were in the center of the stream of American go get 'em, right?
Yeah,
so
well,
what happened in that period with your connection to that inner place that you met up with your granddad?
I think I kind of compartmentalized it because nobody ever spoke about it. We didn't have satsang where we talked about things philosophically. Everybody just did puja, and then we ate dinner, and then we went to sleep. There's never any discussion about it. And so we would leave my grandfather's place, and then we'd go abroad wherever we were living at that time, and life went on. Certain places I realized, like I went to a lot of Christian schools or Catholic schools, and I found that I wanted to go to church with the rest of the Catholic kids. Even though they wanted me to do some other moral science class, I said, can I please go so I can sit in church? Because I wanted to sing the hymns. They were singing. So I didn't really think much about any of this, honestly, until I came to New York and I was working on Wall Street and all this. And I had a total burnout with that job. And I decided to do wildlife trips in Africa and India, which is what I was doing for a while. And it was then that I met Krishna Das. But everything that happened before that, I feel was, I started listening to a lot of Indian classical music. I was slowly getting pulled back into that realm of the way in which, because Indian classical music, as you know, is very spiritual in a certain way. So I was kind of moving into that direction. And I started doing yoga, which was something that was beginning to get popular in America. But for a while, I had no connection with any of this. I was just doing what I had to do to survive. I got married and went through all kinds of family stuff, and I got divorced. I changed my job a few times. And being in the bush and being in the natural areas was a big part of my practice, I think, in those days, because I really loved that connection with nature. And that was a big thing.
So then you're doing yoga at Jiva Mukti, and then somebody comes on singing, you heard?
Well, it wasn't even at Jiva Mukti. I didn't even know there were yoga centers. This was in my gym. And in my gym, in my building. And a Jiva Mukti teacher who, Kachi, a lot of people know her now. She lives in New Mexico, was teaching at Jiva Mukti at the time. And she had a retreat. After teaching us at the gym, she left. And I said, I really want to continue practicing with you. And she said, oh, come up to the Catskills. I'm going to do a retreat. So I'd never done a yoga retreat. And I said, okay, fine, I'll go do that. And Krishna Das was on the schedule because he had been singing at Jiva Mukti prior to that. So she invited him to come and do the satsang at night. So I was very suspicious about what this was going to be about. I say this a lot. I really thought he was going to be like a failed Indian musician who, would be kind of leering at me and, you have all these experiences as a woman in India. It's like, oh, I don't want to deal with any of this. So but I wanted to honor Kachi. It was her retreat. And I said, I'll go. So I told my friend I'm going to sit at the back of the room. And Krishna Das walked in and I saw, and he was wearing all black in those days. And Bobby came with him, with the plastic mridanga. And I said, this is going to be worse. This is now like a white guy. What is happening here? And it's going to be some new age thing that I'm not going to like. I had all these ideas in my head, and I'm just like that now. But anyway.
That's why we are so close.
So one thing I noticed, though, before he walked in the room, on the table was a little photo of Maharaj-ji and a little photo of Hanuman with a candle. And I thought, who's that? And that kind of occurred to me because that seemed important for some reason. So he sat down said, "Hi, I'm Krishnadas," and closed his eyes. I don't remember him saying anything. He started Sri Ram Jai Ram, and honestly, Raghu, 3 hours went by, and somehow I was sitting like right in front of him, like here. You know how people sit right in front of the harmonium? That was me. I never left, that's how it was.
So karma is real, everybody, and your dharma certainly manifests, so you know what it is you should be doing.
I did know that I wanted to chant with him. We became very good friends over the weekend because we just connected and we talked a lot. And at that time, things were just happening for him slow. One Track Heart had just been made. And somebody gave me, he was giving away the free audio tapes that was on Triloka label. Remember that?
Yeah.
Back then. And I broke that tape because I listened to it so much. Just over and over and over. And I heard Maharaj-ji's Ram, and I was like, what is happening? I was crying, and, you have that first opening in that way. I was like, what is this? And I would talk to him about it. And he basically didn't say very much and just said, here, read this. And he gave me Miracle of Love and Near and the Dear and By His Grace, which I still read over and over again. And then finally I begged him, I said, I have to understand what this is. I need to go to Kenchi. You don't need to go to India. And I said, I want a guru. I want a guru. I need a guru. You don't need a guru. This is going round in circles. And finally I said to him, I said, okay, I don't need a guru. I just need to go to Kenchi. I need to go and set foot in this place. I know I do. So he said, all right. If you're going to go, then you must go and meet this being. And he then pointed me towards Siddhi Ma at that time. So that was 2 years after I met him. And I went in 1998. And that was the first time I had Ma's darshan.
For everybody, Siddhi Ma was our Indian mother and a saint in her own right.
Can you see her?
Yes, it's beautiful. That beautiful picture. And so he left her for us for many, 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 many years. And she just left at the end of last year, at the end of December. And she was a beacon of light for many, many, many people. And so, and I say to you, and so then, of course, I met you around that time when you met Krishnadas, because you would come out or I'd come to New York and he'd be doing stuff, and we met. And then later, as you started really going to India after you met her the first time, you were going fairly often, and so was I, and we would meet up in Kenchi. And I tell everybody, one of the most wonderful things for me was we would sit and do Hanuman Chalisas, and Siddhi Ma would have us do them at 4:00 every day, and in front of this statue of Neem Karoli Baba that they have in this Samadhi Mandir temple, and we would do this, and a lot. We've done it a lot, and so it's definitely something that's a highlight experience being with you doing those, Nina.
It really was. Yeah. And, one of the things that I had the great blessing to be able to do was to translate for her, in the darshans.
And by the way, and Nina knows a lot about my private life. Not that anything is, I was trying to hide anything from her. But because she would be interpreting for me and eventually my wife Siddhi Ma Saraswati, my real, and we were involved in getting to know each other. So Nina would be translating all of the details of what Ma's like. Oh, really? You're gonna get together? And she used to bug me about getting divorced all the time previously. So you know too much.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. So much of the translations, I would just do them and it would come in through here and out. I didn't retain it. It's really interesting. Like, unless I wrote something down, I wouldn't remember. It was like purely, honestly, the fact that I know Hindi at all I understand now that it was for this reason.
Really?
So that I could talk to her. It's not my native tongue. We speak Kannada. My family's from the South.
I know.
I never studied Hindi, but somehow I can understand it and I can speak it. Not bad.
Yeah. No, terrific.
And so that was a great blessing for me to be able to. And sometimes I would just sit there and as I would translate, or somebody was talking, she's, how she does this. Maharaj-ji did this with you too. Suddenly she'd look at you, and so in that look, she's telling you something. It's a split second, and everything else is going on, but she's told you something really specific. Yeah. So while I had a chance, I was sitting there. Many times I was just sitting there and talking, and I was getting teachings simultaneously of my own, separate from what I might be saying to the other people.
Well, just for everybody, because it's not often that any of us get a chance to sit with such a being, and I know, and Krishnadas is correct that there's no need to go to India. Maharaj-ji has proved that over and over and over since the day he left, and since the days we knew him. Absolutely no difference. And he himself said it's not necessary for the guru to be a physical body. But it's delightful, is true, and should karma point you in that direction. So you just give us something of an experience of being with her, especially when you first were getting to know her, and how she uncovered a whole bunch of stuff, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's been interesting now over the last 20 years to think about how I should name my relationship with her, and I've decided, because this is what it feels to me, like I consider her my guru. That's how I talk about her. And I don't know if there are a lot of people who have different ways of thinking about Ma, but my relationship with her at the very beginning was, I still don't understand the presence of Maharaj-ji necessarily. I mean, I certainly didn't see him in the body, but he's got a hold of me. No doubt. It came through Krishnadas's first Sri Ram and took me to India. And the way I see it is that he is that presence. She is that presence too. She happens to also be inside of that. And I'm inside of that too, with you and everybody else. Yeah. But when I first saw her, I had this idea that I was going to have this great release and I was going to fall at her feet, all the drama that you have an idea of, and she's going to sweep me up in her arms and say, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of you." I don't know what I was thinking.
No, we're all thinking that.
Okay. So I got there, and my memory of this is that she was sitting in the room, and she was like a silhouette. I couldn't see her face, but she was sitting inside the presence of Maharaj-ji, like the same feeling I had when I first heard Krishna sing Sri Ram. But the thing that occurred to me a little bit later as I was walking around the temples, I don't know if you've ever looked inside the temple and up into the dome of the temples. I don't know why I did. And I recognized that I had already had a dream of Ma before I ever went there and ever knew her. Because the dream was her sitting, I don't know, it's so bizarre dreams, but she was sitting on a swing, suspended from a pink dome. And she was wearing this white sari, and I was sitting on her lap. And we were on this swing. And when I looked up in the dome, there was the dome with the chain, with the thing that comes down. So who knows, like, what is chronological? I can't explain. But over the years, I felt a call to go and see her every year, at least once a year. The only one time I didn't go was when Uma was 2 years old, and as a toddler, it was really hard to take her. So I didn't. That's my daughter. But I went there when Uma was 4.5 months old. I took her there as an infant because it all felt very important for me that I get Ma's blessing as much as I could. And she has helped me on a personal level from the first day. up until the very last day that I saw her, asking about my personal life, my marriages, my divorces, my children, my relationship, my work, my mother, my father, my cats. I mean, name it, you name it, everything, everything. Nothing was separate. Nothing was spiritual or nothing was not spiritual. Right. It was all one, all the same.
Right.
But
huge thing that is, by the way. You're just saying that, and I'm agreeing with you. But everybody out there, this is many of us. Absolutely, we do our spiritual life, and then we do our worldly life. Okay, this is illusion. There is only one thing going on, and this is a perfect example of that Nina just recounted.
And when you were with her, in her presence, you could understand that, because she was a model of that. She was always, Maharaj-ji was always on the background, foreground of everything. And yet, she was dealing with what was happening in the kitchen. Is there garbage out there? Does this need to be cleaned? Thinking about a million things. Who's getting what prasad? Everything was happening at the same time. And with full consideration of everything, everybody's feelings, anything that was anybody's comfort, little things. I mean, once, I don't know why she said this to us. We were in Kenchi, bunch of us, and we were going to drive to Delhi as we normally did, when it was time to leave. And she said, don't drive. And it wasn't monsoon either. It wasn't monsoon, like the roads were going to be difficult or something. She said, don't drive. Go to Katgodam, stay the night and take the train. Oh, no, it was Haldwani, not Katgodam, Haldwani. So he's like, stay the night in Haldwani. Okay, we'll do that. But she had food packed for us. And Raghu, little container of salt, because I like salt. She packed with her own hands.
Really?
I mean, there's a little, and this is just the littlest of things. Yeah. And every time, I went back, we had all kinds of things to deal with. But one of the moments that I had, and it's hard to describe, I talked to Mirabai Bush about this, because all of you have spoken so much about Maharaj-ji over the years. And one of the words that comes up so often that you all use is unconditional love, And I'll be honest with you and say that I have a tough time using that word, because I'm not 100% sure really what that means. So if I had to describe my relationship with her, I would say that there came a time where whatever was going on in my heart and my mind, I felt like I didn't have to hide from her, and that she would never turn away from me. In fact, she moved into my heart. She lives here. So any question that I have to ask, any feeling that I might have, she's living it with me. But I trust that it's going to be okay because she's there.
Well, there is no conditions. It's unconditioned. Yeah. Absolutely unconditioned. When you talk about those little things, that they mean more than the big things, the kind of consciousness that is absolutely inside everything. Yeah. Dada Mukherjee, who, by the way, anybody out there listening, the greatest book to get any kind of feeling of Maharaj-ji is Dada Mukherjee's books, The Near and the Dear, and By His Grace.
Absolutely.
Those two books, alongside of... I'm not a big Miracle of Love recommender these days, because there's so much in there of Indians interpreting Maharaj-ji's words in a way that we know he never said it. At least he never said it like that, so it pisses me off. Love Everyone is more accurate, because it's the Westerners who actually wrote down what, and we're way better than the Indians.
But still, back to Dada Mukherjee.
Yeah, Dada Mukherjee said, I've had so many miracles done on me, done for me, done whatever, by Maharaj-ji. They aren't what I was at all interested in. I was interested in the human caring that he displayed on a day-to-day kindness. That's what I was interested in, And he literally was certainly one of the greatest devotees, people that we ever ran into, who's actually a living emblem of the kind of service that we know of Hanuman, which Hanuman does, who for Ram. So
did you spend much time with him, Raghu?
Yeah, ton of time with him.
Nice.
Whenever I went back to India, absolutely went there, went to Allahabad, and he'd say, "So you've come?" And I tell him when I came, when I was leaving. He said, "Oh, so only 2/5 of the time you would be coming here?" He'd jive me about it. Oh God, so great. So listen, we're talking, and we have music, which says things so much better. So we want to talk about music and the chants on this CD, but we need to really let people have a chance for themselves to hear a little preview, even though it'll be coming out a few weeks from this. Well, no, the podcast will be around the time it comes out, so you'll be able to get the record. But there's one song in particular, or chant, and it's called Amma Sita Ram. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that I'm a huge fan and proponent of the way in which mantra can absolutely be the most uniquely connected way to get to the true selves, to our true self, whatever you want to call it, spiritual heart, soul, Buddha mind, doesn't matter. But it's the most efficacious way. And of course in India, because we're in the Kali Yuga, they say it is the only way. Right. So there's Nina, wonderful, especially in the middle of this, it's a fairly long piece, the kind of trance-like repetition of the mantra with a beautiful melody, simple, which is fantastic. That enables anyone can just get into it just like that. Mm-hmm. That I really, really love and appreciate. And I think let's listen to it a little bit and then talk about mantra. Okay, here we go.
Rama Rama Ram Sita Ram Rama Ram 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 Rama Rama Ram Sita Ram Rama 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 Ram Sita Ram Rama Ram 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 Rama Rama Ram Sita
So that was not the whole song, but some of Amma Sita Ram. And I guess we're referring to Ammachi in terms of the Sita Ram?
Yeah, I'll tell you just a little story about it. When Uma was tiny, her father, Devdas, is a very deep devotee of Amma. So we spent a lot of time with Amma. And one of the things that Uma liked to watch
Amma, just so everyone knows, is referred to as the hugging saint.
Yes, Mata Amritananda Mayin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would watch little videos of Amma satsangs because Uma used to like to watch that and listen to the bhajans and stuff. And I just remember this one video that we watched where Amma had just finished hugging a whole lot of people in the old days. And it was in a gym in Australia or someplace. And she got up, she was wearing her white sari, and she picked up the cymbals and she started singing what I think is this melody, but we can't find it anyway. I heard it many years ago. I don't have a recording of it anymore. And she just started walking in a circle and singing this. Simply, no music, no nothing. And everybody in the room got up. And she did this cute, like 1 step, 2 step walking in a circle. And everybody, and they just did that for a long time. And there's something about the simplicity of that really struck me, And I don't know how, but many years later, this melody came to me. I remember it as what she was singing, but none of the Amma devotees remember it. I asked Devdas, he said, I don't know, it's your version of something. He doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful though.
Yeah.
So let's talk about mantra a little bit and related. Obviously, we're talking about chanting the name of God, and there's the wonder of Hinduism is there's so many different gods and goddesses, and whatever your proclivity is, you can establish a relationship with that aspect of the divine. So it's which is a wonderful thing. So mantra, though, you talk a little bit about mantra and how it's been the central practice for you, and it's manifesting through sharing this with other people through these CDs.
Yeah. The literal translation of mantra is, the sound that is a protection for your heart mind, And there's something about just that literal translation that I find helpful, that I have something to hold on to. That is protection. That's just at that very basic level. But without even knowing that, and later hearing so many different mantras, but also feeling connected to so many of them. We might have a proclivity towards one, and we might adopt that as our regular practice. But still, you just in the way Krishnadas or any of us sings kirtan, we're singing different mantras throughout the night. And I feel that the energy that's carried in that mantra is an energy that passes through each one of us. So we happen to resonate with whatever that is at that moment. And it's healing. I really think that mantras are healing. I don't know how it works. I'm sure somebody's figured that out. But I know that it works because we've been doing it over time. And what it's become for me, and I say this all the time about not just even mantra, but specific prayers like Maharaj-ji called Hanuman Chalisa Maha Mantra, is that, it's not just a tool, but for me, it's a refuge. It's a place where I can go. It really is. And so when I wanted to have a japa practice, in case people want to know what japa means, japa is the repetition of a particular phrase, divine name, a phrase of divine names. And in the Indian tradition, it's believed that if you adopt one of them as your practice, like many gurus will give initiation into a particular mantra, that you should stay with it. Like by his grace, Maharaj-ji goes to Dada in the Shiva temple and gives him the Gayatri mantra in the morning. Do you remember that in the very first part of the book?
Dakshineshwar.
In Dakshineshwar. And I felt like I really wanted to have that for myself. And I had seen a lot of different groups, like, there's the whole Muktananda and Guru Mai, like Om Namah Shivaya is a very big thing. Or you go to ISKCON and the Hare Krishna mantra is a very big thing. Or you go to Amma's ashram and, everybody has their own. And when we went to Kenchi, of course, the thing that I remember most in my mind from One Track Heart is Maharaj-ji. There's that little recording of him saying Ram, 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 Shri Ram, Ram, Ram. And when Krishnadas told me that was constantly on his lips, he was always uttering it, whether it was silent, and then I read other things about, Raman Maharshi said that our very inner nature is in a state of invocation at all times. And so we just have to tap into that place. These are all messages coming in so many different ways, but ultimately you understand that when you do the practice. The chant then starts to do you. You're not even doing the chant anymore. I'm sure you wake up in the middle of the morning. Suddenly you'll wake up in the morning and you'll be like verse 5 of Hanuman Chalisa. It happens to me. I don't know. I'm sure it happens to you. So I like that place.
Yeah, I like it too. I'm totally with you. I found something you said, and this, you really gave a wonderful definition for the core of what practice is. And then there's one thing that you said that is a very practical, shall we say, result of actually doing the practice. And it allows a way to step out of reactionary behavior. I saw you somehow said that somewhere, wherever I picked that up. And this is, as listeners of Mindrolling know, I have been spending a lot of time with different people discussing Krishnadas's premise of the wake up in the morning with the movie of me. In fact, we're doing a whole thing at the summit I called him, I said, so we're doing this thing at the summit in California, which is a big conference. And I'm going to use this movie of me thing from you. I just want you to know that. Of course, he wants a royalty, but there's no money coming, so I don't know what to give him. That's just an old back and forth with him and I for decades and decades. But it is a wonderful subject to address. And certainly in this case, and what you said, this goes a long way, this particular practice, to really be allowing you to be oriented to the witness that is not with judgment, that place inside that it's all okay. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to get lost in following and reacting to everything around us by virtue of you have that. Once you create, and Nina just said, that mantra starts to do you, the more that you do it. And then you are seeing the universe, your little movie of me, from a completely different perspective, one that you're not quite as caught up in it. So very practical application.
But again, you only really understand that when you do it. People can say it to you all the time. Which is not to say that you shouldn't use other methods to help yourself. Whether you're going for therapy or you're doing other meditation practices, all of that is fine. But my experience has been that there is a power inherent in these names that are transformative. And so if we do it, it works. Yeah. But you got to do it.
I do all sorts of different things, different practices, and the chant is a central thing, but I do I'm interested in Tibetan Buddhism, etc.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, I went with a friend, Sridhar, to the Hare Krishna ISKCON people had a convocation of doing Hare Krishna Hare Ram, doing the mantra, every day, all day kind of a thing with different leaders and so on. He invited me there, and I thought, well, it's beautiful in some mountains of North Carolina in Boone. And by the time I got out of there, I was ready to shave my hair, put the little top notch in that they do with the Krishna cult, and say, you're absolutely right. There's no need to do anything at all. Just do Maha Mantra. And I was part of they had indoctrinated me like that. I was part of that cult. So but
you didn't.
I didn't, but I still do, and I still use this as a kind of jokey way to say the efficacy of chant mantra. If anybody, well, what do I do? My life every day, it's a chaotic thing. I don't know how to get in balance. It's the easiest way because it encompasses both the meditative practice that one would say, okay, meditation, I'm going to use the breath and I'm going to follow the breath and I'm going to get one pointed. It encompasses that, but with the heart and with the other thing that you're talking about. These mantras have an effect that we have no idea about. Subtle vibrations. And in the doing of them, something happens that we can just allow to happen. So I do think this is the most efficacious.
I think it can be that way. A lot of it also, though, Raghu, I think it depends on our intention, and the amount of energy that we dedicate to the practice. Like, as you know, Ma had said to us, she said, yes, you all know Hanuman Chalisa, you can sing it for hours, very good. But when you do your practice, and she told me this, when you are at home doing your own practice, she said, read and try to focus very much on what it is that you're singing, the actual meaning of what you're singing. All of this is to create the concentration and try to let go of the thoughts that are also in our mind flow. I mean, it's going on all the time. You know this, when we're sitting and singing Hanuman Chalisa, we could be thinking about, is this happening okay in the retreat? Because we have so many practical things that we're thinking about at the same time, right? So it is important to dedicate also your mind and your energy and your time, even if it's just this much.
Yeah.
I think that's worth 5 minutes of doing 1 hour of walking around with your mala and doing, and like not really paying attention to what you're doing.
Yep. By the way, it took me 30 years of her telling me, not telling me in particular, but saying, you got to learn the words to this. So read this thing when you're doing it, the Hanuman Chalisa. So took 30 years, but I got it after a while.
And now it's there, right? When you sing it, you can think of what you're singing.
Not 100%, but
that's okay.
Pretty good, good. And I keep working on it. I keep doing it. Every time I do it, I think of her. Every time I do it, I think of her. So to me, that's just another blessing.
I was just about to say.
Yeah. So, okay, my favorite song, chant on the album. Okay. I mean, I think I already told you this, so it's not a big surprise. Tashi Lama Chenno.
Lama
Chenno. Okay, and explain what that means, and
it's interesting. Every song in this album has some little story behind it.
Yeah,
but
that's great.
This particular one, I had gone to be with the Karmapa up at KTD, which is up here in
17th,
Mm-hmm. Yes, 17th Karmapa. I had seen him once before when he first set foot in American soil, which was some years ago. And I just went to see him because I knew he was a great being. I had no connection with any of the Buddhist teachings, nothing. He walked into the Waldorf Astoria and I was in tears. I didn't stop crying, honestly, for the whole time that he was sitting there. He was talking about Starbucks coffee. It didn't matter what he was saying. And I didn't understand what was happening, but I understood some other lifetime connection was there with this being, who knows. So I've continued to see him whenever I can. And more recently, I went to see him at this monastery upstate. And the Tibetan devotees did this beautiful thing, which I'm sure you've seen. Before he enters the room, they all start singing Karmapa Chenno. They all stand up in awaiting, they're creating the space for him. And rather than talking and chit-chatting or whatever, they're making the space for his arrival. And they're calling to him at the same time. So it's Karmapa, come be with us. Come,
Chenno is that, come.
Yeah. Come and be here in my physical presence, but also come live in my heart. So when I heard that, I thought this is really beautiful. And I mentioned it to Lama Surya Das. And he said, well, Lama Chenno is a mantra that all Buddhists know, Lama Chenno. So I looked it up. And there are lots of different versions of Lama Chenno that Tibetans sing. And Surya says an interesting thing. He says, calling out to the Lama as if from afar. Because Lama is Guru, Guru is inside our hearts, but we don't know that. So as if from afar, you know. And it's similar, like in the Hanuman Chalisa, we say, Hridaya Basohu, means come and live in my heart, you know. Same idea. It's the same idea that we want the divine presence to blossom. So it was just there in my mind, I suppose. I don't know, again, how these things happen, but I went to see Genevieve. Genevieve plays violin with me and with Krishnas, and we're very close. And when she had her baby, her first baby, Tashi, I went to California to see her. And when I was holding him, I was singing to him, and I started singing this melody. And she said, what is that? That's really beautiful, because she knows all my music. And I said, I don't know. I started singing Lama Chenno. And she said, well, you should sing it, remember it. Because that's the other thing, the melodies come, and if I don't remember it, then they're gone. So I kept singing it, and then I kind of worked with it a little bit. And then I would just sing it myself at home. And then I went to go and sing kirtan for these bunch of Buddhist, some kind of teacher training thing they had done. And they asked me to lead kirtan for their graduation ceremony. So I went and I was singing my usual stuff in the Buddhist, very quiet, listening, deep meditative state, but they weren't singing because they didn't know these words that I was singing. So then I thought, I'm going to break out this Lama Chenno. I'm going to do this. Maybe that'll work. So it was the first time I had sung it, and they were totally there with me. They were right there with me because they knew that phrase, Lama Chenno. So I decided to call it Tashi Lama Chenno in honor of this baby.
And it's a duet with Krishna Das. It's absolutely gorgeous, and without knowing anything, you wouldn't need to know this backstory or even what it means. You would get the connected feeling for what it is, for sure. Which is the beauty of music. You don't need to understand anything. It just takes you there. So it's really, really fantastic.
I mean, it's such a simple phrase of pure longing, which we all feel.
Yeah, exactly. Terrific, Nina. So great to have you with us here.
I'm happy to be here.
And now we're going to play part of it after which will be right now, but we're going to say goodbye and then we're going to play it. So it'll end the podcast.
That's it? I don't get to hang out with you anymore.
No, our sponsors only allow for 1 hour. Sorry. We do have them now, thank God, actually.
I know, I was going to say.
That's a good thing. But everybody, of course, we are going to, when you go to the page, there will be show notes, which will have all the links so that you'll be able to get the record and also be able to be connected with Nina through her website or Facebook or however which way. And maybe even, I have an idea. How about,
yes, you are an idea man, this I know.
Yeah. How about books of your choice that you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, I could do that.
Now, give me a couple right off the top of your head.
Right off the top of my head, definitely By His Grace people should read.
Yep.
I also like the Devi Bhagavatam by Ramesh Menon.
Ramesh Menon, right?
Right. And the Krishna Leela by Vanamali.
Krishna Leela by Vanamali.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, there's more, but that's it.
Well, we only have room for 3 on the page for some reason.
It's a lot to read.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nina. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, my dearest Guru brother. I will see you very soon.
Yeah.
Where am I going to see you? Somewhere.
Well, somewhere over the rainbow.
Okay. Give my love to Saraswati.
Yes, we'll do. Namaste.
Ram Ram.
Lama Chenno.
Lama Chenno. Lama Chenno.
Lama Chenno. Lama Chenno.
Lama Chenno. Lama Chenno.